Hello, everyone. My name is Sarafi, and I'm happy to meet you. Today, my goal is to talk about the Duel Links Banlist predictions and the state of the meta for the next banlist coming at the end of the World Championship Series. So, currently in the state of the meta, there are two main decks that see a lot of play. And that is Orcust and the Raging Pendulum version of Odd Eyes. These two decks comprise a significant portion of the ladder at all ranks. It does not matter how low you drop, you will see people trying to climb with Orcust, and you will see a significant number of Odd Eyes players. So, Orcust sees a lot of play despite being difficult to run, even at low ranks, because it's so cheap. And Odd Eyes sees a lot of play at high ranks despite being carried by a skill and so accessible because it's so powerful. So we have an interesting conglomeration of two decks, one of which you would expect to see only at high ranks, and one of which you would only expect to see at low ranks, dominating all aspects of the ladder. How do we solve this problem? Well, let's talk about it. The other decks that you see Rockets, Chronomalies, Speedroids, and Sulfur I don't think any of these decks are that big of a deal. Speedroids is powerful, but it's fine for a deck to be powerful. Chronomaly is basically Speedroids before Speedroids came out. It's a deck that focuses around getting a single monster negate out, but their monster negate does not destroy cards. They have to rely on a trap card to do that. They use Barrage Blast as their sort of follow-up removal when other decks like Void Ogre Dragon and Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon destroy the card. So bad deck, don't play it. Rockets are currently popular as an Odd Eyes counter. If Odd Eyes becomes less prevalent, then Rockets will become less prevalent as well. The deck is okay. It is not good. And then Sulfur are consistent. Their board is very fair, and it opens up all the time. The skill is good. The search in the deck is very good. You will almost always get a very solid board with at least one or two pieces of interruption on every Sulfur game, which I think is why a lot of people like it, but it's not overbearing. It would be fine if Sulfur was the best deck if the power level was low enough that Sulfur was the deck we were all worried about. That would be a meta that I would want to play. Okay, so why is Orcust a deck that people are really frustrated with? Why is Orcust the deck that everyone on Reddit is talking about nerfing? Well, Orcust is extremely consistent. They are able to, with almost every card in their deck, develop a board that puts Dingirsu, Orcust of the Evening Star, on the field with two materials, and also puts multiple Orcust monsters in the graveyard to allow for rotation of cards during the next turn, regardless of what cards are in your hand. However, this is not a problem. It's not a big deal for Orcust to have a defensive tool, which protects their board, and some follow-up for next turn. That's not what people are frustrated with. The reason why people dislike Orcust is because it sets a bunch of back row that it protects with Dingirsu's ability. And the back row is what causes so many frustrations. When you have to deal with multiple copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device, or Compulse and Ice Dragon's Prison, or Crackdown and Needle Sealing, that is what causes you to just get that feeling in the pit of your stomach. It's like, oh, I can't win. I might as well just concede. I think Orcust should remain in the game. I do not want Konami to nerf Orcust to the point where it's just dead. I don't want that, because I like the deck, I like people playing the deck, and I think that if the deck did not have this flood of back row, people would actually enjoy playing it, and enjoy playing against it. It wouldn't be an issue. So, what have other people said? Well, the main thing that I see from people all over the place is that we should ban Mermaid, and this will not fix the problem. It will make the deck less consistent, which will make the deck less good, which means fewer people will play it. And then you will not see Orcust as much, and that will mean that people stop hating it as much. But when you do encounter Orcust, it will be the same deck as before. They may not open their full combo every game, but the games that they do, they will still have 3 back rows set with Dingirsu, and it will be just as bad as before. The only thing that banning Mermaid changes is the number of times that opener happens, which will impact the Orcust player more than it impacts the Orcust player's opponents. The Orcust player is the one who's going to be like, oh my god, I should have won this game if I had Mermaid. Whereas the opponent is just going to be like, oh, he bricked, no big deal. You might not even know what their deck was if they brick. So that is not going to make you feel any better about going against Orcust. It will just reduce the number of Orcust players in the game, which will make you think about something else. But it won't be a satisfying solution for anybody. Banning cards should be a last resort, and we haven't begun to try other options to adjust the deck yet. I think that we should start off. Orcust should have a time in the meta, even if they are powerful. We shouldn't break the deck apart after just 2 months. The other thing is, Nightmare Mermaid is banned in literally every other format, and it's cool to have her in this game in this one low power format. You know, we don't have Goblin, we don't have a ridiculously strong Nightmare Goki deck, and we don't have the board space to make Nightmare Goki a real problem. We don't have U-Links, so we don't have to worry about U-Linking. Why can't Nightmare Mermaid be in the game as sort of like this one place that you could play the deck? I do want Nightmare Mermaid to stay. I don't think banning Nightmare Mermaid will fix the issue, and I hope that Konami understands that, which I think they do. They gave us Mermaid to begin with, so I think this is fine. Okay, I've seen a lot of people say that we should limit 3 on some of these Orcust cards, and the problem is that the entire reason people like Orcust is because they don't need to run 3 of any of their cards. If you limit 3 on Harpur, they'll just run 1 of it. If you limit 3 on Nightmare, they'll run 1 of it. If you limit 3 on Symbol Skeleton, they will run 1 of it. Limiting 3 on an Orcust card does absolutely nothing. It will cut the number of cards that they can run in the traps from 3 to 2, and that's it. How about limiting 3 on the starters? Well, if you limit 3 on Scrapper Cycle, the opponents are going to run Tetherwolf. Well, if you limit Tetherwolf, then they'll run Phantom Skyblaster. And if you limit Skyblaster, they'll run Scrapper Cycler. Now, if you want to go full nuke and just say, no, we are not going to let Orcust players get away with this, and you just put a limit 3 on all 3 of these starters, congratulations, you've made the deck worse. Because if they have a limit 3 on all of their starters, they're going to run Ibli instead. Remember, Ibli can just go into Mermaid by herself. You don't need Phoenix. So you've made the extra deck more flexible, and now you've added Ibli lock on top of everything else. Is that what you guys want? Because that's what you're going to get if you limit 3 on Scrapper Cycler, Tetherwolf, and Skyblaster. So let's not do that. Now, if they did limit 3 on these and Orcust went to the Nightmare Corruptor Ibli, that would make the deck less powerful because you would have to run Signet Mining, and Signet Mining would involve discarding an additional card from your hand. So what would probably happen is there would be fewer people who ran Switcheroo and Sealed Tombs because you are less likely to be able to use a Cosmic Cyclone even if you open it. And instead you'd probably see people using Draw Sense low level as their skill. That would definitely change the deck up, but you'd still be dealing with Nightmare Corruptor Ibli, and no one wants that. You don't want to go back to a meta where Ibli is prevalent, do you? Let's get back to the core of the issue. Even if you attach a limit 3 that would stick to Orcust, the deck would still frustrate you. Because just because they can't run Compulse or IDP or Crackdown, that doesn't change anything. They're still going to hit you with Needle Sealing. They're still going to play Bottomless Trap Hole. They're still going to play Warning Point of Brook of Moon. And you're still going to be dealing with 2 or 3 back row every game. It doesn't matter what they are. You're still going to get interrupted. You're still going to lose. So a limit 3 will not fix the issue, and it will not change anything. Here's my proposition. We take Return and we put it to 1. Now, if you limit Return to 1, I do not think that means people play Return over Mermaid. I think that means that people just drop Return. People will still play Mermaid, but they won't draw 2 cards. Now, this will kill the Babel version of the deck. If Babel can't play Return, they're dead. That's fine. I don't think Orchestrated Babel should be in the game to begin with. It's a very stupid card. It's the entire reason that Orcust is a serious, powerful deck, even to this day. I believe Harpur is still banned to this day in the TCG, and it is entirely because of Orchestrated Babel. So, no, we should not encourage people to play Babel. Babel is not any more balanced than Mermaid. So people will still play Mermaid. They won't draw 2 cards. People will still play Babel, and they won't draw 2 cards. And the people who try to play Return will suck. So, deck will still play Mermaid. They won't draw 2 cards. So they'll probably have 1 back row in their hand, and they'll use Galatea to set Release from deck. This is excellent, because this makes the deck consistent, like it is now. It makes the deck feel like Orcust because they're using their own trap card as opposed to a generic back row, and it gives you more counterplay. Because now if you force your opponent to use their back row to interrupt your turn, then Dingirsu loses all of its materials every single time. So now, instead of dealing with Compulse or dealing with IDP, you're trying to figure out how to force your opponent to use Release so that you can then turn around and blow their field up. That's going to be a lot more of an interesting interaction. You're going to have a lot more options, and your opponent still gets to play Orcust. Everyone wins. Only thing, though, we definitely need to limit 3 on Needle Sealing. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about, how do we solve the back row issue? And my first thought was we should just limit 3 on everything. And I did post this on Reddit. I thought we should just limit 3 all the back row. Because even if we deal with Orcust, there are other decks that have a generic draw power. And in a 20 card format, if we get a card for a deck that is decent, that can be used regularly, and that card just draws you 2 cards, it will be the same thing. We will see that deck play 12 back row and just ruin the game. I am hopeful that, rather than my initial idea of limiting all the back row right now to deal with the problem forever, I am hopeful that this exposure to what Return did will encourage Konami to simply not release the generic draw power of other decks. If they give us another archetype that has that card, they just don't give us that card from that archetype. They give us, like, for example, Magical Musketeers, they could just have not given us Kid Brave. And then I know that Kid Brave doesn't see a lot of play right now, but if Magical Musketeers were powerful, then Kid Brave would be a part of that deck that was frustrating to people because it would be able to let them draw into generic back row. That's an example of a card that I think shouldn't come to Duel Links anymore after this. But Needle Sealing is the worst. How many times do we have to see Needle Sealing get abused before we decide that we're just going to limit it? Like, it was played in Salamangrates with Balinks, then it was played in Trickstars with Festival, and now it's being played in Orcust with Dingirsu. We just need to stop. Needle Sealing, in its purest form, should be for one of two things. It's either a bad Treacherous, in other words, it's a card that you can destroy 2 of your opponent's cards with, but you have to destroy 2 of your cards, but you can play 3 of. If that was how it was being used, I'd be okay with it being unlimited. The other option is, yeah, it can blow up your opponent's side of the field, but you have to, like, be one of those decks that just sets a monster and passes. That's not happening either. If it's only being used in cheese scenarios where it is a one-sided dark hole during your opponent's turn, then yeah, it's a powerful card. We should allow it to be in the game. I'm not saying to ban it, but it should come with the same cost that returning a monster to your opponent's hand or banishing a card from their field in their graveyard comes with. Limit 3 on Needles. Okay, that is all for Orcust. What is the issue with Odd Eyes? The issue with Odd Eyes is it is a deck that is good enough, and literally everyone has it. And that makes it really weird. You might think that a deck like Salamangrates was, it was free and it was good. And Konami had no problems nerfing it. Well, the thing is, even if a deck is free and good and popular, people still have to opt into playing it. The people who played Salamangrates still had to go through a box to get Circle, for example. They still had to grind on Soulburner to get Balinks, and there were people that did not do that. So even though Salamangrate was free, it wasn't widespread in the same way. If Konami puts a limit on any of these cards, or they reduce the power of the skill, that is impacting literally 100% of the player base. It is, and that's a really bad position for Konami to have put themselves in. You can't change this deck without hurting literally everyone, because everyone has these cards, whether they wanted them or not. And that's going to be a really negative experience for the entire player base. So we're going to see how this goes. I like Raging Pendulum. I think that it was very clever how they added a card to your extra deck. And basically what that did was encourage people to play Oath Dragon Magician. And because people were encouraged by the skill to play Oath Dragon Magician, they were able to see how valuable Oath Dragon Magician is to the deck on their own. It was like it was a training wheels to teach people how to play Pendulum. And I think that was very necessary because Pendulum is the most confusing and oddest deck in Duel Links and in Yu-Gi-Oh! And more people are isolated from the Pendulum mechanic in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community than any other mechanic. So giving everyone the cards for free and giving them a skill that teaches them how to play the deck is the best way to get more people to understand how pendulums work. Because a lot of people who try pendulums actually like them. And a lot of people who don't try pendulums don't know what they do and get frustrated and don't understand it. So by encouraging everyone to play pendulums, now everyone knows how to beat pendulums, and more people are likely to invest in other pendulum decks moving forward. So wonderfully implemented. But +3 is too much. Okay, so first of all, I'll go ahead and say I'm not going to propose any limits. No limits on these cards. They are fine. But the skill is too generic and too good. So let's tone the skill down a bit and make it much stricter. Here are my suggestions. First of all, Raging Pendulum should require that your deck contains at least 12 Pendulum monsters that must come from Odd Eyes, Perform Pal, and Magician, and no other monsters. So no more Jinzo, no more Triple D, Doom King, Kaiser, whatever it's called, and no more Cosmo Dark Lady. I understand that these cards are cool, and I like the tech options, but that's not in the spirit of the skill. Anime skills are released so that people play anime decks. And that's it. That's what they're for. These are the skills that are allowed to be the most powerful, therefore they should have the tightest restrictions. You should literally not play anything other than the anime characters' decks, and that's just the intention of the skill. I have no problems with that. I think that's a great design philosophy on Konami's part, and I embrace it entirely. Double down on it. But the way that you reduce the power of the skill is I think the skill should be activated twice rather than once. So the first time you activate the skill, you unlock the ability to summon Raging Dragon. You add Odd Eyes to your extra deck and the Perform Pal to your hand, but you don't get the Magician from your deck. And then next turn, you can activate the skill again to add the Magician to your deck. And the reason for this is I think that being able to draw 3 cards and fix your deck this way gives people too much flexibility with how they build the deck. So I think that forcing them to use at least 12 monsters, and with the implication that at least 3 of your cards are going to be dedicated to Pendulum Call, along with punishing people for putting more back row in, will fix the problem. Because you are basically, like, yes, I understand that Pendulum decks are an inherent minus, and it's really bad, and in Duel Links, it's really bad to set your own scales. You know, Abyss Actors see basically no play because they don't have a skill that sets their scales. Dynamist, even though they got United Pendulum, has been so forgotten that people haven't even bothered to try and build Dynamist now that it has United Pendulum. I understand that Pendulum decks are very difficult to use in a 4-card hand, but that doesn't mean that you should get a free pass. You should have to build your deck properly. You get a free rank 7 and a free rank 4 with this deck. You should not be able to always get them, no matter what your opening hand is. Setting 2 scales is not enough, especially when you have Pendulum Call and Wisdom Eye Magician. You should have to have the rest of your deck consistently level 4 and level 7. So if you choose to put cards like Cosmic Cyclone in your deck, then the cost to you should be that sometimes you can't do anything. Sometimes you have a level 7 in your extra deck and a level 4 in your hand. You're just stuck. That was your choice, though. And if you build the deck properly with 17 monsters and 3 Pendulum Calls, you don't have that problem. But then everyone else gets to deal with you more predictably because your opening is always the same. And that is the example of what the deck should be. It should be a very consistent, middlingly powerful deck that is too predictable. And therefore, it does really well at low ranks and really badly at high ranks. That is how you fix this deck. As an aside, I do think that one of the frustrations that I have with this deck is that on turn 2, because I make Xyz monsters on turn 1, I actually don't ever have any cards in my extra deck on turn 2. So you actually get some added use of adding the Pendulum monster to your extra deck from your deck on turn 2, because then you have more spaces to special summon, to Pendulum summon with, rather than only Pendulum summoning from your hand to your main monster zones. Okay, let's talk about Synchron. The Synchron deck is interesting, and I think that a pure Synchron list should still be viable. But I agree with everyone else that the skill is bullshit. The skill is too strong. It is just like the anime, and I love that part. But the problem is, if you are trying to make your board and your opponent disrupts you, and they use a card like Warning Point, for example, that should stop you from synchro summoning, you can then just use the skill to toss that card and get Siren Dragons. Or you can use Mind Control to toss cards and get Siren Dragons. And you're not supposed to be able to summon a high-level synchro monster without more interaction from your opponent. The problem with the skill is and has been that the 2 bodies that you get are too useful even if you don't use the skill to its fullest. And I think that should be fixed. So, the Siren Dragons that you summon should be unable to attack or activate their effects. And this was true in the anime as well. Yusei played a card that made it so that Red Dragon Archfiend's effect couldn't activate, and then he sat on it for like 3 turns. That should be what we're doing. And activating any part of the skill should lock you into specifically. You can only summon exactly Junk Warrior, Stardust Dragon, Shooting Star Dragon, and Shooting Quasar Dragon for the rest of your turn. That's it. Any part of the skill, including sending a card to search for a Synchron. You should be locked into exactly the path the deck builds for you. Junk Synchron with a level 2 in the graveyard into Junk Warrior, use the free Synchro Chase to make Stardust Dragon, send Stardust to get your 2 Signers, next turn, return Stardust from your graveyard to your extra deck, get the Life Dragon, and then Synchro. Life Dragon should also not be able to attack, by the way. Lifestream Dragon that you get on turn 3. It should also not be able to attack. That's all you get to do. This should be a skill that you use against NPCs for fun, cool games or in raid duels. And that's it. And if you want to make Quasar in PvP, use the Shooting Star Road skill. It's better for it anyway. Other decks, Steroids is a good deck, and they should watch it closely. But it's not too powerful that we need to fix it right now. They already have a limit 1 and a limit 3. You could put Yo-Yo or Taketomborg to 3 to cut them off from the generic spells and traps, but I don't think that's necessary right. Rockets, I think, are balanced. I don't think they're they're too powerful. They have Void Ogre, and that's a pretty good card, but it does require them to have an empty hand, and it can only negate one spell or trap. So as long as you have ways to get around that, you are pretty good. And the main issue that people have with rockets is their ability to constantly refill. And Abyss Dweller does answer that. And the only thing that rockets do to interrupt an Abyss Dweller being made on turn 2 is they play Evil Swarm Nightmare. And not every rocket player is going to make Evil Swarm Nightmare on turn 1. I do think that the goal for you should be to make Abyss Dweller, remove Void Ogre, and then just destroy the rockets on the field, and then they don't get to bring them back because you made Abyss Dweller. I think the counters to rockets are clear enough that the deck can exist, and as long as Odd Eyes isn't too prevalent, it won't be that popular. Predominantly is bad, stop playing it. Okay, that's the video. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. This is Serafi. I was thrilled to have you here.